Good morning. And good morning at home. So it's just me again this week, but thank you so much. Thanks for, you had a stick break. Here we go. This happens. I saw one go flying. It actually broke. Okay. Guitar players lose picks. Piano players just lose their mind. Bass player, if you play with your fingers, you're quite all right. It's when you use a pick, it's a little tricky, but yeah. Wow. Okay, well, good morning, and good to see you. I'm just thinking for a second. Let me make sure I got everything I need, that I'm on, and I think we're ready. So we're on live there. That's what it was. Oh, we got it switched over already. So hey, welcome. We are walking through, as you know, a series. I don't know how long it's going to be. Just looking at grace in the Old Testament. That's what I've titled it. I want to remind you once again that grace in the Old Testament is exactly the same, but kind of different. The real idea I'm pulling for here is that God is the same. Frequently, he's portrayed by many, or sometimes people who read the Bible feel that in the Old Testament, he's sort of vindictive and tit for tat and kind of angry all the time, but Jesus is full of love and kindness, and there's this vast difference. But when you see the characters in the Old Testament and you see God's interaction with them, we actually learn that he's extremely kind to the level that most of the characters we're looking at in the Old Testament would not qualify to be deacons or pastors or elders or serve in ministry in church. Now, that is never, where grace is often misunderstood, is that people think that somehow when you say, wow, isn't God kind toward the sinner, the frequent misunderstanding is that people think that we are saying that God is just saying thumbs up. God winks an eye at sin. It's all okay. Not at all. Sin cost him his son on the cross. It's very painful. In order to restore the relationship between God and man, to open up for us all the promises of the new covenant, that difference in the Old and New Testament, that new covenant, to open all those up, Jesus had to pay a high price. Grace is not free. It's very expensive. It's just that Christ paid the price for us. Therefore, we are left with one simple thing. We believe and we receive. And from there begins a new relationship. So we speak of those kind of relational terms in the New Testament where we believe and receive, and that's where all the benefits begin, isn't it? Being born again and justified and adopted and sanctified and so on and so forth. Our security forever settled. The question settled of whether we're going to heaven or not. And that is the difference in the new covenant. The Spirit of God now lives within. In the Old Testament, he didn't. He came upon people. He comes upon people in the New Testament. How do we know that? Acts chapter 1, verse 8, you will receive power when the Spirit comes upon you. He lived with people in the Old Testament. He lives with people in the New Testament. How do we know that? Because of the frequent reference of the Spirit being with us. Even Jesus himself said that. But he did say in the book of John that the Spirit would be in you. It will live in you. And that's after the cross and the resurrection when the Spirit was given. And so there is the transforming difference in relationship that the Old Testament characters didn't have. But God is the same, and his inclusion of different kinds of people in the Old Testament shows us the hugeness of his kindness and mercy and favor. So that's the gist of this thing. I keep explaining that at the beginning. I hope we don't sound like a broken record. We are now going through the life of Joseph. This is going to be our last week on Joseph. I would like to take more time on Joseph, but we're going to conclude it here. And we've tried to see some different character angles. We've tried to see, for example, just some of God's favor and kindness on the Egyptian people, on Pharaoh. Think about that. His kindness on Joseph's dad, his kindness in Joseph's life, and yet the incredible pain and misery that Joseph faced throughout the course of his life too. How God doesn't pamper. So, wow, there's a lot that we could talk about just there, but I don't want to short circuit all of that. I'm watching the time here. It is, we've got plenty. So, what I would like to do is I'd like to finish with Joseph's life with the little section that takes place before, and before he dies. It's in Genesis chapter 50. It's down to verse 15. And I'm going to story tell you just a little bit. What took place before this piece of the story? Well, this is what took place. Jacob, Joseph's dad, finally made his way back to, he met Joseph again. He settled with his kids and all their kids and flocks and whatnot in the land of Goshen in Egypt, which is a very wealthy area of Egypt, fertile, great for growing things, great for cattle and sheep to sort of graze and what. So there they were. But Jacob eventually died. And so that's the piece. We're going to just skip past some of this because there's the blessing that he gives on his sons. It's an amazing part of the story because when Jacob died, he had 17 years of time to be with Joseph, his son, whom he hadn't seen for so many years. So a real blessed season of his life at the end. Praise the Lord. After years of sorrow. But when he died, Joseph told Pharaoh, "My dad died." And Pharaoh allowed Joseph to take a large entourage of people down back into the land of Canaan, where Abraham had purchased land to bury Sarah. And so Isaac was buried there, Abraham was buried there, and Jacob said, "Don't bury me here, bury me back there in our land." And so this big promised land, this huge promised land, they actually had to purchase a piece of land, although God had promised it to them. It wasn't quite fulfilled yet. So they had to purchase property, Abraham did, to bury Sarah, and that became the place where these ancestors were buried. So Jacob wanted to go back there, and he told Joseph that, "Don't bury me here." So they embalmed Jacob's body, and they returned with a huge entourage of the dignitaries of Egypt. I don't think Pharaoh went, but pretty much everybody else in Pharaoh's court. And there they buried him, and they buried him in that place, and they ended up calling that place the Egyptians, the place of the Egyptians, the local people, because they remember this entourage from Egypt coming down. So he was buried, and then back they came. And so he had blessed his sons. He was able to be with Jacob all those years. He was buried. All the sons came back. And business was carrying on as usual. And this is where the story of Genesis concludes. And so as we do this, what I'm going to do is, I believe I have some slides that are ready to go. I want you to see these slides because we're going to go back to a section that we dealt with a number of months ago. I know a lot of you were helped by it, and I enjoyed talking about it. It was something we did on here on forgiving. Do you remember that? Forgiving? Okay, this is a good topic. We could probably teach on this again and again and again and again, and it's just there's a lot of juice in this. And so we're going to read a story. Before we read it, I'm going to give you these slides. So think, and as we read, I want you to let these slides I'm going to show you sort of be the filter. Read the story, and then I want you to just comment. And as we read, it's a short section, so there's a lot of time for your commentary, your questions or thoughts. So when it comes to forgiveness, let me pop this up this way and see if we can catch that. Sorry, it's a little angled at home, and it's probably reversed. It says TSUM, sum. How do you say U-O-Y? How do you say that? U-O-Y. U-O-Y. Just, huh? Yoy. Oi. 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 Sumoy. It's like sumo, but sumoy. Sorry, it's backward in the slide here. Usually I like my slides and it works better, but anyway, hopefully you're clever enough at home to be able to swap it. So that says forgive. Number one. Must you forgive? You must forgive. So if we say it as a question, must you? What about the ongoing relationship with people where there's been harm done? Must you relate with them anymore? Are you obliged to relate with them anymore? What about revenge? Must you revenge? So just 3 simple questions. Yes or no on the first one? Yes, we have to forgive. And I'm doing this because, once again, it's good to tease these apart. It's good to kind of pull this all apart. Think in 4K, not in 480p, if I could use that illustration. Oh, how do we know we forgive? Well, Jesus makes comments like this in Matthew 6:14. If you forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. Now, there are a lot of verses like that. He's not saying, how do you get to heaven? He's just talking about, as a believer, you walk around with a lot of unforgiveness and you go to God saying, oh, sorry, I said a swear word when I stubbed my toe the other day. Please forgive me. And the Lord's just sort of saying, no, you release others and I'll release you. This is not the answer to how to get to heaven. Not answering that question. Just relational forgiveness with the Father and others. We could spend a lot of time on this. A couple of verses. Ephesians 4:32, be kind to each other, tenderhearted. I like that word. Forgiving each other as God in Christ forgave you. I think we could build a very strong case from the Bible that we need to forgive. Okay, relationship, yes or no? Well, you're not obliged. Maybe, perhaps, in some cases it would be a good thing, but you're not obliged to relate with everybody in life. Now, as a quick reminder, when we did that session here, this is the range of problems we had that people were saying, oh yeah, well, I never thought about that, never thought about that. What about where there's been violence against your family, against your household, break into your home, there's been violence in your home? Forgive? Sure, but will you let that person near your house? No. What about slander? Your good name has been wrecked. Would you work with those people again? What about fraud? People who may be close to you practice identity fraud, and you're afraid to let them around, so you will forgive. But you don't want to go through that again. So we could name a number of different things. What about the abusive partner, the abusive spouse? You know abuse. Abusive spouses, they harm you, they lie against you, they slander you, they beat you up, and then when they get caught, they blame it on you. So you learn, I can forgive, but I need distance, I need space, and I can't deal with that anymore. So no, we are not under obligation to relate with everybody. Our relationship might be from a distance. Well, how can you say that? Doesn't that carry unforgiveness? No, absolutely not. It's possible to forgive, but remember these words from Paul, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 14 and 15, where he is encouraging Timothy to keep his distance from somebody called Alexander the metal worker. Now, we don't know the whole story here, but Alexander the medical worker, I'm sorry, that was a slip of the tongue. That might be another person in your life, I don't know. Alexander the coppersmith, the metal worker, did me a lot of harm, Apostle Paul says to Timothy. Now notice these next words, the Lord will repay him. Oh, Paul, are you an unforgiving person? I think if you ask Paul, he'd kind of look at you and say, The Lord will repay him for what he's done. So there's a sense of freedom when you realize the Lord will judge everybody, including your enemies, those who have harmed you. So, the Lord will repay him. You too should be on your guard against him. So he's even warning Timothy about this man. So, consider that. Second part, relationally, revenge. Are we allowed to revenge? Well, what did Paul just say in that verse? Yeah, the Lord will repay him. So no. So if we could just simple answers, yes and no, all right? If it is possible, as a verse for you here, this is from Romans chapter 12. I didn't put the reference in here, I don't think. If it is possible, I love that. As much as it depends on you, I love that. Sometimes things are out of your hands, right? You would like to have a good relationship maybe with somebody, but it just ain't going to happen. Hold on. As much as it depends on you, live at peace with all people, with everybody. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath. Now think about that as a Christian. I think sometimes our sense of forgiveness is just that, we feel like there's no space here for judgment anymore, and hoping that God will take care of something that we were powerless to care for on our own is somehow unforgiving. I don't think it is. I think it's recognizing that God is just, that God will deal with things, and that should make us think about people maybe that we have wronged. Do you want to fall into the hands of the Lord when you see him on Judgment Day? Sure, you're going to heaven. with things that people have against you that you never went back to sort out and reconcile, right? So it helps us to think about that. But for those maybe who have wronged us, leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay. The Lord revenges. So we could talk a lot about that one as well. So on just those three items, I've got those boxes ticked. So think about that. We're going to go back and read a couple of quick comments. Phil, first of all to you, what are we going to say there? Vengeance is mine, right. And that's actually a quote from Psalms, I believe. Deuteronomy. Okay, thank you. There's a few places that it actually says that. Yeah, Deuteronomy. Thank you, Phil. Mm. Right. So he can do it whenever, however he wants to. Okay, yeah, excellent. Maybe causes people to realize, man, that was wrong. I need to be right with God and straighten out my life. Right. Right. And this gets, so to Phil's point, it may not be the judgment day. It might be even in this world that the Lord sort of rectifies things. But kind of back off. I don't think there's something in Paul's heart when he's warning Timothy. My guess is there's not something in his heart when he's writing Romans either and quoting the Old Testament that he's just sort of waiting by with hope and glee and giddy expectation, gloating over his enemies. Gotcha! God gotcha! Yeah. But I will tell you, Revelation has some verses in there that says, how long, O Lord, faithful and true, until you avenge our blood? And so there is something. I know I don't get lost here. I want to get back into reading. And Phil, to your point, then we'll read this text. It's a very short text, so we can read it quickly. But go ahead, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and that's not an easy thing to kind of work out in our heart, is it? Where we say, okay, I have forgiven, and we might need to say it with our mouth a number of times, even though we've done it. It may be healthy for us just to remind the Lord and ourselves that we have forgiven them. But the ongoing emotions that get tagged into that when it's been 20 years of an abusive partner, you don't just shut it off. It's insanity. It's not. It shouldn't be expected of anybody, really. There's quite a bit of, and I'm just giving one example. It might be many different things. Yeah, business. Somebody's burned you, and you've lost a lot of cash. You don't just walk away and smile. Oh, God forgive you. Maybe some do. But okay, so with that, just kind of capture that thing for just a second. That little visual, and I want to read. Then we are in chapter 50 of Genesis. And I want to dig into the text. I'm going to ask you questions about motivation. So pay attention to the story here. It's just down to verse 21. So here we go. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead. So remember the story. Where are we? They've all come back now to Egypt, right? They're going to settle there and be there for 400 years. Genesis is a family book. It will close as a family story. Exodus will open as a national story, right? This is going to be the end of the closing of the family time, a number of years of silence, and then Exodus will open up. Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead. They said, what if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him? Fair question. Okay. So they sent word to Joseph saying, your father left these instructions before he died. Now the brothers are claiming this is what Jacob said. Your father left these instructions. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, pause just a second. Do you believe that Jacob said those words? Why? Why not? Why do you think they're lying? It's what they do to cover their tail. We know that we also can relate with that. We've all at least been tempted by that, right? He's gone now. He can never come back and sort of, fact check or whatever. Jacob's gone. So now, you talk about dishonoring your father after his death, Okay, but what else just in the text itself is written in there that makes us think this is a lie? This is just concocted. It's right there, very apparent. Verse 15. He's already gone. And what do we capture their motivation, don't we? What's their motivation? Self-preservation, right? Now suddenly Joseph's this big guy and dad's gone. Oh dear. All right, so just pausing on that little bit right there, what does that tell us about their own heart? Are they repentant? They're not, are they? These guys are the same. Scoundrels. And yet each one of them is going to have a foundation stone named after them in heaven forever. Go figure. You talk about God's grace. Okay. So, but yeah, their behavior is not good. I wouldn't be anywhere near these guys, So, yeah, Ken.
Well, I mean, they weren't seeking true forgiveness, because if they got it under false pretenses, they weren't really forgiven. They were just looking to be saved.
Yeah.
They just didn't want to be killed after their death.
Okay, right. So picking up that, they just don't want to be killed. This is all self-preservation. Okay, they went to Joseph and said this. Okay, you remember Jacob, our dad? Yeah, he's gone now. But Jacob, our dad, said something. He said, "Go when you boys." Yes, Father. Yes. This is how they're presenting it, right? Yes, Daddy. Yes, yes. Oh, yeah. And Daddy told us when I die, tell Joseph to forgive you. And so Joseph, we're just here repeating Daddy's words. Now, what would it have sounded like if they really, really meant it from their own heart? What would it have sounded like? We're sorry. Joseph, now that Dad is gone, we want to clear the air with you. You got the power right now to wipe us out. And okay, they didn't say that, did they? Now, I asked a question. Remember the question I've been asking in a couple of weeks? What's the question? Do we ever see anybody in this story coming out and say, "Will you forgive me?" The answer to that question? Don't be misled. We're not seeing that here. Kenny, were you going to comment on something or no? Yeah, sorry. I thought
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, the dad had plenty of time to bring them all together and clarify this. Okay, he might have, but that's where we're kind of jumping and reading between the lines. Remember, we were talking a little bit about that. Did any of this ever get cleared up? Did they ever have a meeting where Jacob brought them all together and says, "Guys, when I go, we've got to have a clean house here, right relationships." So listen to it. Doesn't seem that happened either, did it? It just seemed to. It was never discussed, never talked about. Yes. Did Jacob know? Woo! Help me out here. Yes. Yeah, it was brought out earlier in the story, wasn't it? So you can imagine.
Well, can you imagine the anger of the father of Jacob?
Yeah.
Towards his own, children, that they would do that to another.
Yeah.
Of his children.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think the father would be, really, he'd have a tough time forgiving them for having done that. So one of the reasons I asked is because he did favor Joseph, right?
Right.
So there was no anger from Jacob against the brothers. Was there no punishment?
he didn't seem to correct it, to bring them together, to issue any kind of as a dad, I don't know, repayment or nothing. No, he didn't suspend him, take away his car keys. Okay, all 11 brothers, come in here, I'm taking away or Benjamin, you're out. 10 of you, I'm taking away your car keys, or I'm cutting you off from the inheritance, or yeah, just you know, yeah.
Joseph does actually, pull them together to do the blessings. They really don't sound like a lot of blessings to me.
Okay.
He goes through that list with the boys.
Right, so we missed a section in chapter 49 where Jacob, before he died, brought all the boys in and blessed them all. He didn't bless Joseph, but he blessed his boys. So as a quick note, when you see the list of the 12 tribes of Israel, you will see two different ones. One of them has to do with land and property, and that's when you'll see Manasseh and Ephraim mentioned, because why? Levi got no property. The Levites went out and lived among. When you're talking about, and you're seeing a list of just the actual sons, you'll see Levi mentioned in Joseph. So that's not an error in the Bible. It's the reason for that. One of them has to do with property. That's when Ephraim and Manasseh are mentioned instead of Joseph. So, but to Pastor Dan's point, there's a blessing made by Jacob, but some of the blessings are like, they're not really blessings. You know, I lay my hands on you. You know, yeah, may you run wild, and you know, all your enemies eat all your flocks and everything. It's like, Dad, you know, come on. And then in Genesis 49 verse 10, remember who was the real stinker in this story of all the brothers? Judah. Because Judah was the one that took the plan away from Reuben, thank you. I'm struggling with all the names. With Reuben. Reuben initially had a plan when his brothers put him in the cistern or grabbed him and were going to kill him. He had a plan to put him in a cistern and send him back home. And Judah came in and sold him to Ishmaelite slaves. And then Reuben came and said, "What did you do?" So Judah was the one that came and was going to offer himself as a slave and let everybody else go. So there's something of a redeeming quality in Judah. I don't know if that's why. Part of it's just God's plan, but Jacob promised that through Judah would come this Messiah. But besides that one, some of the blessings are not really blessings at all. So yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. Now just pause for a moment, because I want to finish reading what's going to happen here. I know all of us have family and family relationships, and they may be very good, they may not be. They may be kind of a mixed bag of good and bad. As a dad, I love my kids getting along. I love harmony. Harmony. I'm a harmonious person when it comes to home life. I want everybody to be happy. You know, if something's wrong, I don't sleep well. Maybe some of you are different. You're like, I don't work out, whatever, I'm going to bed. I can't. You know, this one's upset with that one. Oh, God. So it's just me, you know. So I don't know how Jacob lived with this stuff, you know, just dirt, trash in the family, and just undealt with. Now I know there's at some point as a parent, you just can't dig into everything. You can't. It's just not possible. I don't mean that. You know, kids are different. I was different from my brothers, and it's just life, isn't it? So there's variation of people and persons and that's all part of family. But this is real family dirt. The dad's broken heart for, what did we say, 22 years? Where his other sons lied to him about what they did, and then it was all revealed. Wow. And these brothers, still we see at this point, they're not really saying we did wrong. They're just wanting to save their skin. And they're concocting another story. They just don't stop. Yeah, so this gives me hope, because I don't see this depth of problems in my family. Maybe you do. Maybe you think, that's just like us. You know, there may be other places in the Bible where I say, that's just like me. But this is one I don't, but I think, wow, there's hope, you know. There's hope that if this family is this dysfunctional, there's hope for my family, you know, so I find that's a good thing. Let's finish this little bit here, and, you know, just keep giving your comment. We're just going to go down a few verses. Okay, verse 17, this is what you are to say to Joseph. So this is the lie. I'm going to, maybe it wasn't, but I'm going to assume that it was a concocted story to save their skin. I ask you to forgive your brothers. I mean, there's just so much in there. Notice their cowardice. What is so hard about going to somebody and saying, hey, I'm sorry? Hands up, no caveats, no but. You ever have those kind of conversations in your house? But conversations? I was kind of wrong here. Yeah, but I was kind of wrong. Nobody's really wrong, just kind of wrong. And this is like one of those, hey, hands up, no caveat, no extra, fine print or something. I did you wrong here, and they did. This would be one of those situations that's kind of clear. Some situations are not clear. You ever been forgiven by somebody and they say, I'm sorry you feel that way? It's like they're not really acknowledging that they did wrong, and sometimes they may not have done wrong in their own mind, okay? This is one of those that these guys did wrong. There's no questions asked, but they're still not just coming clean. They're admitting there were sins and wrongs, and that's why they treated you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of your servants, your father. When their message came to him, that's Joseph, he wept. So it seems they sent the message up into his court, right? Joseph gets the message and he weeps. His brothers then came, threw themselves before him. We are your slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Think about those words we read. It's mine to avenge, right? Paul's words about Alexander, the medical worker. The medical worker, I did it again. The metal worker. Alexander, the metal worker. Think about that, yeah. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. Do you think Joseph knew this was a concocted story? You think so? You're pretty confident about it. I mean,
his father was there for 17 years or something, and in all that time, why wouldn't he have just said that to him?
right.
Correct.
Right. All he had to have was a one-on-one with Joseph. He didn't even need to send it through his brothers or through a mediary. Just go straight to Joseph and say, Joseph, listen, we know these guys did you wrong. Please don't hold this against them. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. I was going to ask you that question. What do you think the weeping's about? Ken.
I'm just going to say, this shows the power of forgiveness, because that's right. Joseph, and from what I'm getting from the story, Joseph had already forgiven him way back when he brought him into Egypt, and he was showing his forgiveness. That's right. But because they couldn't humble themselves and go to him and admit what they did, they struggled for years on this, and still couldn't get past it. So, yeah, Joseph was the one that was wrong, but he didn't suffer. It was the brothers that suffered.
Yeah.
They couldn't admit what they had done.
Okay, yeah, really good point. Joseph seems to have come to terms with this quite a long time before.
And I don't think
This is not Joseph's aha moment. Oh, now I get it. Now I see God was working. Joseph came to terms with God's plan. The pain, the misery, difficulty that they caused to him was the Lord's path. Like I said, I would have chosen a different path if I were the Lord. I don't mean that to be blasphemous or unkind to God. I just mean I'm a pamperer. I would like everybody to have a nice life. The Lord sees it differently. So he allowed Joseph to go through the mill, get his whippings and beatings in this life. And Joseph was able to come out of that a bit of a man, you might say, but also seeing the bigger purpose of God, forgiving. And yet, there was a little piece of that I didn't want to miss.
well, the brothers were the ones
The brothers, yeah.
and then
The brothers were the ones, I don't want to cut you off again, but just for folks at home, the brothers were the ones that were carrying the misery of this thing still. He had long seemed to have dealt with it, yeah.
And I don't want to put anything in there that's not there, but that's what leads me to believe that Joseph and Jacob did talk about this. And one of the reasons that Jacob didn't address it on his deathbed is because he knew that Joseph had already forgiven him. And there was no worry that he was going to do it on
Okay, yeah, very, very, very good point. In the case that Jacob and Joseph had already had a chat about this, that too, this moment was already dealt with in Joseph's mind and expected that maybe it will come because they've never talked to him. And now Dad's dead, and here comes this message. Okay, yeah, okay. I already talked with Dad about this, and you know, they're concocting a story, but I talked with Dad already. Me and Dad had a one-on-one. Joseph might say we already had a chat, and yeah, Kenny. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say this thing. Joseph is weeping because he thinks, oh, my brothers know me by now.
Yeah.
I think there's just grief that they're
Yeah, why the weeping? What's at the heart of that weeping of Joseph? Joseph is able to see God's hand in this to forgive them, and they haven't taken the first step of growing. They're like little baby kids.
I'd have been in his place, I'd have given him attitude.
Yeah, he could have, he played with them once. He could have played with them again, He could have sort of tormented them just a little bit, So, yeah, so that weeping, what's the source of that weeping back there in verse 17? Is it just the brokenheartedness, looking at his brothers, thinking you pathetic guys? You're pathetic. Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on. You're still just preserving your own self. Can't even come to terms with saying sorry. Hey, do people do that in this life? Oh, yeah, they do. And Joseph doesn't seem to be expecting anything more from them. He just, like, to Kenny's point, he's probably just weeping here because he's thinking, I didn't expect it, but there was a little expectation. And that little bit of expectation space is now gone. I realized that day will never come. So, okay, some of those comments he's making here, what are your thoughts on this? Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. What are some of your thoughts on, Joseph could have played with them. Billy's saying, it would have been a funny point in this story if it went from the 12 sons of Jacob to the 10. Well, he had 12. They got kids already. Why do we need them to live any longer? Off with their heads. Of course, that would have been the opposite of what Joseph is actually recognizing. I know your point there is to sort of highlight that, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Brothers are coming to all the lies are coming through.
Oh yeah.
So, Lord's hands right there. Say, here it is. There's a lot of
Great observations. Yeah, great observations. He's looking back now over 22 years, right? Plus another 17 that his dad lived. Somebody do the math. What's that? 32, add 7, 39 years. So we're now looking at like almost a 40-year period of time, just to round it up. Looking back and realizing, this is a great point, catch this, that the dad is now gone and all that these brothers are doing, but somehow the fulfillment of all these dreams. Interesting. Not all these dreams. He only had 2, and they were coupled together. At one point in his life, when he was 17, he had no more dreams. But the fulfillment of those sort of couplet, clustered together dreams at that point in time. And so, yeah, this.
Rich, in that right there is this statement. Guys, if you hadn't done what you've done, I would not have been in the place I'm in. And am I in the place of God? Well, maybe I am.
That's right.
Yes.
But had you not done that, and I didn't like it one bit, I'm telling you that, and I didn't like it one bit, but had you not done that, I would not be in the place that I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's because it was God's plan.
Yeah. Recognizing God's plan. Ooh-wee. And I would say that recognizing God's plan is nearly impossible halfway through. Yep. And how many years was that? This is now kind of the end. We're not going to read any more in their lives except that Joseph dies. So he did live longer, but this is the end of the story. So it's taken, again, nearly 40 years so to come out of the darkness into the light to see this. So, sometimes when you're going through something and it's only been 6 or 7 years. I'm pausing there for a moment. We think that's a long time. That's a long time to be bearing some hurts, and 6 or 7 years. Yeah, this is 40 years. And it's hard to bear hurts in any case, right? But for such a long period of time. And yet there's something here. Somebody comment on the size of Joseph's forgiving, the hugeness of it. Somebody please comment on that. This is so big, and how recognizing God's purposes when others were harming, or when harm came on us that wasn't our fault. Yeah. 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 And how does that factor into the sense of him, well, I think also recognizing that this relationship with his brothers will not be any better. And if he wasn't almost in the place of God, second in power, maybe this whole balance of power would be very different, and the way they'd be talking to him would be very different. But because now they recognize his position. So he's very forgiving, but that too might be also a buffer that's allowing him to relate with them, because now he does have power over them. And yet he's reassuring and he's being confident with them. Maybe part of that weeping is that this isn't getting any better. I had thought maybe through all this my brothers would grow, but they haven't. Sam, yeah, were you going to?
We're supposed to progress the sanctification to come like Christ.
Mm.
And I'm feeling that those 3 verses right there, that shows the magnitude of grace that only someone that has an intimate relationship with
That's right.
can achieve.
Yeah.
That's grace that, man, I know someday that I was filled with the Holy Spirit and abiding in Christ and developing a relationship that I can offer that level. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. BJ, I did see your hand. We'll see if we can get 2 more comments in. It's 10:15. I want to pray us out just a few minutes early so we can get ready today. I'm going to I'll say what you say, but I want to kind of put it in my own words too, just to add to it, okay? I think we read the Bible stories and we think too often that I'm just like them. This is one of those, I think we should ask the question, am I just like that? And don't answer it too fast, because this is a huge level of growth in Joseph's life. Huge. I have not been through that problem. I've been through my own problems. They're probably a little less compared to this. But can I look back? And maybe I'm not there yet. Maybe the story needs to progress a little further before I'm seeing the bigger picture of God. But there's something here of growth and the grace of God, the power of the Holy Spirit, that as a believer we should be looking at and saying, wow, I mean, don't understate the bigness of this moment in Joseph's life. So maybe I'm putting a few of my own words into yours, and we'll kind of mix it in and make it a tossed salad of salmon rich tossed salad. There we go. Yeah, real quickly, BJ. Yeah. Elijah. Oh, okay. Okay. Did you want to add a comment? Okay, wonderful. Yeah. The years that this took to work out. Bill, we'll wrap it up with this one. Mm. Yeah. Excellent. And I like that kind of a perspective. Again, I'm going to repeat this for folks at home because I'm a historian, and I like to kind of forget Rich Bustran in 2023, and I like to go back into the issue and put their shoes on, understand what they were thinking when they wrote these things. This is a dog-eat-dog world that we're reading about. We're sort of. It's not the same world we're living in. You know, there's a lot that went on here that legally would not be allowed. People would be arrested and things like that. You know? And you have the courts to go to. Joseph had no courts. He had nothing throughout this whole process. He was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that might be true even around the world today, that the way that we relate culturally to our fathers here might be different than the way, others do, and there are lots of examples of that. So Joseph's relationship with his dad and the brothers, and there's something there that's a little bit kind of foreign when you look historically back. They're a little bit weird and different, and so we can't assume it's just like us, but what can we learn from them? So, hey, we are at 10:20. Pastor Dan, did you want to make another comment there as we go? Or no? Okay, yeah. Let me pray for us, and we'll give ourselves a few extra minutes this morning to get ready. So we're going to have Lord's Supper and break bread this morning. Lord, we want to thank you coming to the end of Joseph's life. Thank you for such an incredibly open book called the Bible. I'm so glad that you don't hide things. You didn't just write some story of superstars that never did wrong, and they all loved each other, and it makes us feel so pathetic. But we actually read this and think, wow, well, there's hope for us. We see your purposes and plans, something that we can't. And boy, does that speak into life. And that doesn't somehow minimize the pain, minimize the questions, the mystery surrounding things that we don't always understand, even to this moment. But I'm going to just say, Lord, that I'm glad that the story of Joseph is there. I'm glad to see this man forgive something so huge, to recognize your purposes and plans, to leave space for you. And we thank you for this study. We're going to continue on with grace, but for this character of Joseph. And so bless our time together in Jesus' name. Amen.